Hi, everyone. Welcome to Caregiver Circle. This is a special program from Kids Play in order to help us build connections and also to recognize and appreciate the wonderful work caregivers do for all of those children that we all love. We have a very special resource today with us, and I'm going to let his friend Heather introduce him. And we welcome your questions, your comments, and your participation on Thursday morning. So, Heather?
Hello, my name is Heather Damion. I'm the Community Engagement Manager at Kids Play Children's Museum. And we're inviting today Dr. Damion Grasso, who is a clinical psychologist. And he's going to answer some questions that I think would be helpful for parents. I'm a parent myself of a 3-year-old, so I'm struggling with the same type of issues that a lot of parents are out there who are trying to work and also, I don't want to use the word deal, but we're trying to all make this work with children of all different ages. And then those of us who are grandparents who may be tuning in are also trying to think of how they can still have connection and engagement with their grandchildren in this really unusual situation. What makes Damion such a great resource is that he also has 2 kids of his own at home. So he is struggling with trying to school his children online and make those boundaries and concessions that you need to make when you have everybody at home. So I'm going to pass over to Damion so he can give us a little bit of information about himself. And then I have a question for him that's a personal question that also will likely apply to a lot of our viewers.
Thanks, Heather, and hello, everyone. It's definitely a pleasure to be here and share what knowledge I may have and to answer questions if you have any. So as Heather said, I'm a clinical psychologist at the University of Connecticut. And my expertise and focus, both with research and clinical work, has been on helping children and families cope with really stressful events and sometimes traumatic events and loss. And this time is definitely a time where all families are experiencing a heightened level of stress and figuring out new ways to cope with these circumstances. And like Heather said, I have a parent of my own, two daughters, 9 and 8, and as a clinical psychologist, I don't have all the answers. I'm learning too, so maybe we can all help each other out.
Well, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. So having a 3-year-old, I'm noticing behaviors that are very typical for a 3-year-old, but some behaviors that are different from what I see with my child on a regular basis. So we're noticing a lot of meltdowns with him, and he's becoming very anxious if he doesn't directly see my husband or I. Some examples might even be if we're in the bathroom, he's yelling out to find out, are we in the upstairs bathroom or the downstairs bathroom? And then suddenly he may realize that he may not have seen one of us for a while and start getting really anxious about where one of us are. So I'm wondering if you have any recommendations of some things we could do to help him feel more secure.
Mm-hmm. Well, firstly, I guess that's a really common kind of experience and observation, especially for young children, where you see this increase in what we'd call separation anxiety. Anxiety, not being close in proximity with a parent or loved one. Whereas before, maybe, these kids were comfortable, being on their own or playing independently. They're needing more closeness. And in this case, under these circumstances, we're not viewing this as any kind of pathological sign, but rather as a way for them to regulate the confusion that they're feeling and the increased potentially negative emotions that they're feeling because of the heightened level of stress and what they see from their parents and knowing that something's up here, something's different, and it's not all good. So they're trying to figure out how best to regulate themselves, and of course they're needing that time, that closeness with a parent to do that. And you'll see that with older kids too. Another thing you'll see is kind of a reemergence of anxiety that may have been there before. So kids who tend to be more anxious. For example, my oldest daughter had school anxiety and some separation anxiety when she was, more so when she was 5, 6 years old. And that largely went away, but as as we entered into this new period, we've definitely seen an increase in some of that anxiety, needing to know where we are, checking in with us. And what we're doing really is trying to support her and both my kids as best we can, spending more time with them, reassuring them that we're here, we're not going anywhere, that we're there to help them through this. So I guess that's the first, the biggest recommendation is spend more time supporting your children, whether or not they're showing an increase in anxiety around being with you, because they need you right now.
And I know, you're probably experiencing the same issue as a lot of parents, trying to balance that with what you need to be doing for work and what you need to be doing for home. And we had really wonderful intentions by having a schedule up that we tried to follow with my son, but it often really quickly falls apart.
Mm-hmm.
So we've tried to step back from a little bit and have a little looser framework with him. But I was wondering too, what you think about, a lot of people have been pushing having schedules, but I've been feeling like it may be different with different ages of kids, and it may be different with different kids. The struggle is how rigid, I guess, people are trying to be when they have a schedule.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think that's a really good point. It's finding that balance. And I think, how not, you don't want to overschedule, but you want to schedule enough where, you have some form of routine. So I guess a couple things. You want to continue to hold on to, retain some of the same routine you've had all along, because you want some sense of normalcy through this. But of course, we're dealing with some non-normal situations, so there'll be adaptations that we need to make as well. And so figuring out what's going to work best for your family in terms of a schedule. I'll just share, as we were figuring this out, we have a large chalkboard in the kitchen where we kind of write down the schedule for the day or routine. And initially, I went a little overboard, overthought some of it, and had really detailed tasks, by every half an hour. And my kids basically just balked at that and said, no way, this is not going to happen. There were some meltdowns. And really what we landed on was having more of a general structure to the day that allowed for that flexibility, because things will change, the schedule will evolve. And as parents, I think, giving us the freedom to make those changes, not holding our, too much pressure, putting too much pressure on ourselves to need to get that right all the time. Because, we're, as you said, Heather, we're under a ton of pressure ourselves, trying to be there for our children, facilitate their new school work and school lessons, trying to, keep up with whatever's happening at work, maybe through multiple conferences throughout the day. And so, we have a lot going on.
Patty also had a great question, and I just want to ask if you wanted to elaborate any more about it, Patty, about if you have, a situation a lot of people are dealing with when you have a constrained space in your house. You may be someone that you're in an apartment, or you may be in a small house that doesn't have an extra room, and you may have older kids, like a preteen, teenagers, that they're at a point in their life where they may not want to be around each other and have, time, they need more time alone. And Patty, was there anything you wanted to add to that scenario when you're thinking about it?
Right. Thank you for saying the statement too. In addition to the small house and the 2 teenagers and a pre-teenager, there is an older elementary child involved. And so it's quite a cross section of ages. And there are some younger children that are living nearby that come into the home. So what would be your advice? Or I know you said you didn't want to have to give advice, but what inspiring words would you share with these people who are trying to cope with this?
Well, yeah, certainly it's a challenging situation especially with kids in these different developmental age ranges and figuring out what they need. That'll depend on where they're at developmentally, but also every child is different and is going to need something a little different. And so as a parent figuring that out, my two daughters, for example, are not the same, even though they're close in age. And figuring out, maybe one of them needs a little bit more one-on-one time today than the other one. Maybe they need their own space and need to not be together at this particular time. And so being, as parents, as best we can, being observant of signs that they're giving us that they need something. When there's a meltdown, they're telling us they need something and figuring out what that is. Sometimes it will be, finding them, space where they can be there by themselves and away from the family. We are spending a ton of time together. And so, we all need that time. I know I do. I know my kids do, and my wife does as well. And so being creative, I guess, and figuring out how to best utilize, even if you have a small space, how to best utilize those areas of the house, of the yard to make sure that everyone has some time.
Thank you.
So, Damion, this has been really helpful. We really appreciate you speaking with us. And what our plan is, after people watch the video, to speak about it at the next Caregiver Circle. And people can always give us some questions from that particular event that we can eventually get back to them on. Our plan with this series is to have these pre-recorded sessions where we can ask some questions and we can start a discussion with our caregivers. But what's very important to us is to be speaking with a professional. And again, like I said before, you have, the double duty of being both a professional psychologist and a parent right now. So you're having to use these tools and be able to reflect on them and, like everyone else, figure out, well, what's working and what's not. And it's very nice to be able to talk to people that even though you have the degree, you're still having the daily struggles that the rest of us are having and trying to learn from them. So is there anything else you'd like to add?
I just mentioned that there are so many great resources that are out online to help us figure this out. You don't have to do too much searching to find them, and I can certainly share some links as well. The National Traumatic Stress Network is one of those organizations that has a ton of information on how to support kids and support families and adjust lifestyles. And so I would certainly recommend, looking at those resources and figuring out how they might be helpful to you.
That sounds wonderful. Patty, is there anything else you would like to add?
I would really be interested in Damon's kind of a prediction with us. I mean, we're all trying to predict and not look too far ahead, but are there problems that you're anticipating that maybe we haven't gotten to yet with our children and families? Are you seeing in the children that you treat, I know you can't go into specifics, but are you seeing something that jumps out that maybe we need to be aware of?
I mentioned before that these kinds of experiences can certainly exacerbate existing problems. So for kids who do have impairing anxiety, you'll see an increase in that anxiety at home, depression, being isolated from others and having, I'm thinking about teenagers who are used to spending some time with peers now can't do that, or may have an uptick in feelings of depression. I also treat a number of individuals with post-traumatic stress disorder. These are people who've had past trauma or extreme stress, and we know that new stressors can certainly trigger some of the hard feelings that come along, if not the traumatic memory that comes along with that. So as parents, I guess, being aware that these things can happen, that these existing mental health problems may worsen, and figuring out how best to connect with a professional, a mental health professional, or a clinical social worker, or psychologist, pediatrician, and there are resources to do that. It may take, if families have been seeing a provider for some time, it might take a little while before they're able to efficiently provide telehealth services, but that's certainly the goal of, I think, most providers at this point, how to reach these families. And so I guess I would recommend parents, be observant of those, those increases in symptoms, and reach out to a mental health professional in their area to get further advice and see if, the telehealth is an option.
And how are you taking care of yourself as a parent? Because that's a very important thing that we talk to parents about all the time.
Right.
What are you doing?
Right. So in general, not putting too much pressure on yourself. You're not going to be putting 100% into your job. You're not going to be putting 100% into, parenting, keeping up with household chores and so forth. So being kind to yourself is really important. When you're feeling overwhelmed, or, feeling like you've kind of reached that threshold where the stress has been too much, doing something for yourself. For me, it's getting outside and exercising. It's doing something I enjoy, disconnecting from the screens, since we're all spending more time on screens now, to read a book, to do something creative, things that are rejuvenating, really, and building in those things, even when it seems like there's not enough time to do to address all these new responsibilities.
Well, Dr. Grasso, I'm going to add my thanks to Heather's. There's something really special about this time, and one of them is making new connections. We probably would have never gotten to have this conversation before. So we appreciate your time and your guidance. And we like to end Caregivers with some joy. You've been really wonderful about addressing challenges and how to take care of ourselves. But is there part of this that you've enjoyed, that your children have enjoyed, that you could share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think when things do return to normal, something hard for all of us might be, transitioning back to not spending as much time with family, and not having so much time to connect with friends and family that maybe we haven't connected with before or in a while. And so hopefully we'll remember that, we still need to do those things, even if we get back to a normal work schedule. And I've really enjoyed figuring all this out with my kids and my wife, and spending that time together. It's certainly given me a new perspective. It's also, it's also urged me to reach out to old college friends. Heather, you're one of them. And we having a Zoom meeting with friends that didn't happen before. And so,
Yes.
Like you said, connecting with other people has been one positive lesson learned from this.